How is everybody going today? We have another awesome product from SpacemiT. This is another of the MUSE series, which is RISC-V. And whilst I'm probably not going to publish this for a week, today is the most perfect day to be sharing this. The reason is it's August the 9th, which means that Debian has just released version 13, aka Trixie. And this is going to be the first OS, I believe the first Debian release, but possibly the first full, sorry, a bit of rubbish there. Linux OS that has RISC-V as a first-class citizen. And that means that boards like this, which don't have the ARM licensing issues, plus a million other problems, are going to become much more popular in my opinion. And SpacemiT has been really leading the way with newer, faster cores, faster iteration of design standards, and getting products to consumers to test out. That's why you're seeing variants as well, like the Banana Pi builds that have their cores in it. We've seen something else I looked at recently. I forget, I might stick a card there, that also had x60 cores in it. RISC-V is open and is awesome, and that's why we're looking at it today. Now, this video is also sponsored by Brilliant, who can help you become a better thinker, but more on them in a bit. First, we need to have a look at this. Let's get into it. If you haven't seen the video I did a little while ago, I actually had a look at what's called the MUSE Pi that they sent me. Now, interestingly, they've got this MUSE Pi, which is obviously a bit bigger than the standard credit card form factor you might have seen before. Then they've got the MUSE Card, which is more of the Pi form factor or the credit card form factor. Hang on, I'll just grab it. I've got one over there. So here we go. That's the MUSE Pi and that's the MUSE Card. So it can be possibly a little confusing. They are slightly different, different design specifications, obviously, different intended use cases, different costs, different sizes. They both have the same processor on them though, which is, I don't know if you'll be able to see there or if the autofocus is going to have much fun with that, but it's the SpacemiT M1. The M1 and the K1 are very similar, just with different thermal constraints, so you get different power out of them. So that's the MUSE Card. That's the MUSE, Pi, that's the MUSE Card. Now we have, I'm going to give up on that autofocus there, we have the MUSE Pi Pro. So if we're going to look at some of the differences in these, if I can even get it open, normally that works a lot better. There is actually quite a few differences. Let me just open this up. There we go. Now, first of all, the name, MUSE Pi Pro and MUSE Pi. A little bit loud and crunchy. That has to be obvious. Something that they do that not many other organizations do is their incredible packaging. So some stuff you get in very bland, plain packaging. This stuff, no. You get very nice packaging. They put money in it where it matters. Now, MUSE Pi, MUSE Pi Pro. You can see they've immediately changed the form factor, the size. They've gone to this 85 by 56 millimeter design, which is a bit more commonplace. Interestingly, we've got a green PCB here too. This is the first I've seen of it. So I've got some debug headers, we've got a little getting started guide, and we've even got a case that comes in the box, which is fantastic. So you have the MUSE Pi, the MUSE Card, and then the MUSE Pi Pro, and we can immediately see quite a few things. So this one has a glass or a perspex, cap on it to start with. We've got some connectors in there. We've got what looks like it might be a Wi-Fi module. The SoC is on the bottom in a interesting way that I haven't seen before. So this is the K1 SoC, kind of almost on there as a daughter board, I guess. Is it removable? No, that's BGA soldered. We've got an RTC battery connector, SD card slot. I'm going to assume that's DRAM. That's probably eMMC. M2, another M2, USB Type-C, power, audio jack, HDMI, Ethernet, quad USB. Now in there we have camera and camera, it looks like. Is that right? Yeah. 2 camera interfaces with 2 different connectors. So that is your 0.5 millimeter pitch connector, that's your 1 millimeter pitch connector, and that's probably going to allow you to use a variety of cameras. Now, yes, I am talking fast, but we have a lot of content to get through, and I don't want this video to be an hour long. So with it, you get antenna connector. So I was right about that being Wi-Fi. You can see you've got some antenna connectors there, those little UFL or IPEX connectors. This perspex is in the way of what looks like a standard Pi 2 header little RISC-V logo on there is quite nice though. So I'm not going to stick the RTC battery and SD card in this. I'm assuming it comes with some storage, but quickly to get through the spec. So it's got hot and cold separation, so high heat components like the computing units are placed on the back side. That's what they told me that makes this significantly different. And you can see here that everything on the Muse card is on the top side. That is a more standard design. This would have actually taken some complex engineering work to move that to the back and to put those M2 slots on top. What it also looks like we've got there might be mini PCIe. I think that might be M2 and mini PCIe, but we'll get to that. So getting through the rest of the specs, they're using a COM board with the M1 chip and the DDR, as I mentioned. So I'm pretty certain that is stuck on there firmly, but I don't want to try too hard to pull it off. The capacity is different. So this has the option of 64 or 128 gig capacity. Previously, you had 32 or 64 gig. You've then got onboard Wi-Fi, which supports dual Wi-Fi communication, dual channel, and you've got the mPCIe expansion. So I was right there. I'm just reading off something up here that I printed out. You've then got the 4 USB 3.0 Type A ports and the Type C port, as opposed to this having a USB 2.0 and 3.0, and over here we've got a Type C on the go port. So a little bit change there. This, I guess, with the mini PCIe interface is going to allow you to do a lot more as well. So you might want to stick a LTE/4G modem in there. You can stick another Wi-Fi module. You could do a PCIe breakout, even try to stick a graphics card on this. And then this also supports a few more boot options. So apparently, or as far as they say, it supports UEFI boot, can load Linux from the NVMe, it can load it from USB drives, SD card, and it supports a boot priority configuration through what they say is an EDK2 boot menu, which I'm not actually familiar with. Lastly, the design of this is compatible with passive and active cooling solutions and metal chassis. And that's what I believe would be through these standardized mounting holes. You can see here, it's the same as those holes in there, which are going to match the other Pi holes. These interfaces are probably very close to a Raspberry Pi as well. So let's quickly grab a Raspberry Pi case and see how close it is. Well, I've only got a Pi 4 case, and it's definitely flipped to a degree, but I reckon if I found a Pi 2 case somewhere, I don't think I've got one with me, it might actually be right. Off the top of my head, it's close, but I'm not too sure. So that could be something worth looking at in the future. So I think it's time to dive into this bad boy. I am quite interested and excited. There's also Bianbu OS 3.0, which is out as of last month, I believe. And I just started testing that out shortly ago, but I haven't tried a fresh install on something like this yet. So what we're going to do, actually, before I say anything else, we've just opened that, but I've got a whole another one here. They sent me 2, so I'm going to give this one away, including shipping, for free. And I'll get to that in a little bit. Hold tight. But yeah, so on here, what we're going to test out, what we're going to do is look at the product page, the documentation page. Then we're going to test out first boot, see what happens, update the image, try browsing the internet, see if the Wi-Fi is any good, basic use like that. And then we'll discuss where this is going to fit on the SBC tier list. Now, if you're not sure what that is, have a look in the description below. But I've just been ranking these things based on a number of different design concepts. Now, it's hard to put apples to apples, but I do try to take into account the intended purpose of the product. But so far, this looks really nice. I don't know how I feel about the typical green PCB. Their black ones were actually very nice, but if that if that cuts production costs, so be it. Now, first things first is the documentation. You know what I did just note? It actually comes with quite a good little instruction booklet. So if we have a look through here, they've got the QR code for the documentation. They've got an overview, so we can see that if I go a bit closer for you, there, whoa, that is bright. All right, let's keep it down here then. So essentially, the 2 camera interfaces, the 0.5mm pitch one is a quad lane, and then we've got a dual lane up there. Similarly, on the back, we have got our SPI flash, eMMC, and RAM, as I'd suspected. The other core there is the USB hub. They've then got some safe use guides, which is excellent. They tell you about the initial configuration. So this is saying that when powering it on, you can press F2 to enter UEFI. Otherwise, it's going to boot to the default operating system and go through first time setup. And then they've got a few little things about language, keyboard, Wi-Fi, location, time zone, user account, and everything like that. Lastly, there is a small section on UEFI. So boot manager, boot and maintenance manager, and the command shell. That is actually really good. I quite like that. And I think more products need to come with that. Unfortunately, whilst I've been trying for 10 minutes now, and I've tried 2 different connections, mobile and my fiber here, their documentation is not loading. Now, this might be something that's just due to being in Australia. I'm not sure if it's any better from the United States, but here their website is actually quite slow, and I'm gonna have to let them know about that because it does prove to be problematic at times. Now, it could just be this developer section, which has got the documentation under it, but it means that we're not going to have access to anything more whilst we're recording this. And I do apologize to SpacemiT for that, but that's something that they have to realize is actually really important for consumers. That documentation always has to be available and it always has to be good. Now, what we're going to do instead is power this on and see what happens first time round. Here I have my Pine Power connection. So that's PD 3.0. I'm going to plug this into HDMI so we can switch over to that and put a USB dongle in case we need it. We might also just want to have a look at that UEFI options. And then we're going to go over to the HDMI input, which is here. I'll plug it in 3, 2, 1. Not seeing anything. Just so you know, from here, all I've got is little green light. So we'll give it, oh no, there we go. It took a moment. I'm not sure why. It could be because of that UEFI, but we didn't really get a good look at that. So this is booting up now. And I'm just waiting. I'm not going to skip this ahead because I want you to see the real speed, the real expectations, everything that's happening. We've just got that little blinking cursor. And what I'm seeing now is actually what you're seeing. I'm watching the HDMI feed through OBS whilst it's being recorded. And sipping on some spicy water. Okay, there we go. That looks quite nice. I'm assuming this is going to come with Bianbu 2.2. Now, the Bianbu naming can be quite confusing. They have Bianbu Linux, which is their BSP, their board support package, essentially. That's what everything's built on top of. They then have a few different variants of it. So they've got the Bianbu Desktop, which is the standard one that you're going to see here. And then they've got Bianbu Star, which is another variant, which doesn't have a 3.0 release yet. It seems to be based on 2.2 from memory. And that one is instead designed for low memory and low power applications, whereas desktop's meant for full power applications. My mouse just isn't working. Nor is the keyboard. So let's unplug and plug that receiver back in. They've then got the Bianbu NAS version, which is self-descriptive, I think. And they've got the ROC version, which is meant for robotics and is quite integrated. So this is feeling quite nice and responsive. I'm going to connect to my Pi-Fi, but you can see that signal's not really good. The reason for that is really quite obvious, that I have not put these on. Now, I wouldn't recommend normally doing this whilst it's powered on. That's not the best idea. And when you do this, you do have to be very careful because these are quite sensitive little connectors that can easily be dislodged from the board. As you can see, I'm not putting too much effort into that because I don't want to break it. I'm instead just going to use these angled tweezers that I've got, and you can barely see anything there. I'm just going to push down lightly, risks shorting the entire board out. I'm going to use the back of this because you do need a... Wow, I don't know why that one won't go on. It is aligned very nicely. Hold, please. All right, those were just really, really stiff. I don't know why. That was insane. I ended up going like, thinking I'm going to break it and not give one away. That's on now. So if we go back to our HDMI interface, let's just cancel this. Should refresh. It should show us some better signal. If we go previous, next, Let's just connect to it and see what happens. Hey, there we go. You see that signal? No, we don't want that one. We want this one. Nice fat signal there. As I said, I'm going to give, did I click it? There we go. I am going to give one of these away. And now when I was talking to SpacemiT about it, they actually had an interesting idea. They said they'll send me 2, and they agreed it was a good idea, but on one condition. You also have to be a content creator. So the way it's going to work is if you are a content creator and you are into anything related to this of any form, leave a comment below and let me know what you would do with it or what you find interesting about it, and I'll take it under consideration. Essentially, I'm going to be sending this at my own cost because I have to pay for shipping. So I want to see creators out there that do things that are about RISC-V, SBCs, Linux, something like that, where this is going to be useful to them and their viewers and educational. So today's Saturday the 9th. I'm most likely going to publish this on Saturday the 16th, which should be a Friday, in Australia at least. Oh, no, everywhere in the world. Wow, my brain is not good today. I'm going to give it 2 weeks, I'll say. And so that would make it the 10th, I think, of the next month. It'll be in the description somewhere maybe, or you'll figure it out. And then I'll leave a comment below you and say, hey, I'm going to send this to you. What's your details? But I'm going to be looking for content creators that do something that's relevant, that leave a comment that's relevant and possibly interesting, and it's going to be beneficial to the entire community. This is going to be something that I decide based on my interactions with the community. So please don't waste my time. But if you think you could create a video doing something interesting, unique, exciting with one of these, let me know. I'll send it to you. Back to this. We are all set up and ready to start using Bianbu. I have to say, when I first looked at the Banana Pi M3, I think it was, I think F3, I forget. I didn't actually want to try out Bianbu. I didn't like the idea of, oh, this is locked up. I'm moving my mouse, but nothing's happening. It might just be loading a pile of stuff. I didn't want to try out a whole nother Linux distribution. Like, there's enough of them. It's almost kind of atrocious at this point. I like sticking to Debian. Arch is great. Fedora is great. Ubuntu, Mint is one of my favorite Debian derivatives, but there is just a lot out there. And Bianbu is based on Ubuntu, which of course I'm not the biggest fan of. And so I just didn't really want to, but it is really good, especially considering it's completely focused on RISC-V. That, for me, works. Now, this is feeling quite responsive and snappy, and I like that they've got HTOP pinned to the taskbar there. So you can see the system's under a fair bit of load, which is interesting. I've got no cooling on it, and if we're to have a look here, it's not actually that hot. It's a bit warm. I'd guess it's maybe about 30 degrees, but that ain't bad. So if we flick back, what have we got? We've got uname minus A, so we're on a 6.6 kernel there. That's pretty impressive. What release data have we got? Bianbu Star 2.1. Interesting. So they've gone for Star here, not the full one. Didn't expect that. We have 8 gig of RAM. That's pretty nice. And how much disk space did they give us? This one has 64 gig disk. Not bad all in all. Now that's doing that thing that we don't need anymore. We can see Shell's actually taking up a bit more than I expected. What I would be curious about though is how the web browser is going to go. This is the first thing that I always like to test because this is going to make it or break it. And out of the box, we want to see what happens, but then we're going to do all the updates and we'll come back to it and see what happens the second time. So let's maximize this and start. I did also see, interestingly, they've got this AI Fusion X link on the desktop, and I'm quite curious about this because it's not something that I really know too much about, but I thought it worth getting into since it's become so ubiquitous. It's for that reason that I've decided to start working through the How AI Works course from Brilliant. What makes Brilliant different is their approach. Instead of passive learning, you're actively solving problems and building understanding from the ground up. Their How AI Works course is a perfect example. You get hands-on with the actual concepts rather than just watching someone explain them. This method is proven to be way more effective than traditional learning, and you actually end up becoming a better, genuine problem solver than just rinsing and repeating. So, to try everything that Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Platima Tinkers, or scan the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription when you sign up. Brilliant. Learn by doing. Now, this thing is definitely taking its time, and I'm not entirely sure what's going on. It is loading them though. It is counting down. This video is also getting long, but we all know that's what I end up doing. I'm of course talking fast, which we all know, or if you've been here before, you know I do. Please feel free to hit the little YouTube cog, hit playback speed, and hit 0.75, because that is what a lot of people seem to do. And if that works for you, so be it. I know my audio is not as good as it could be. I know I've got an Australian accent that not everyone is fully familiar with. And I know I talk really fast. That is how I do. But if you do like how I present this content, I can't talk today. Also feel free to like and subscribe and all that fun stuff, because it is really important for the YouTube algorithms, and I greatly appreciate algorithm, not plural, although there's probably more than one. I greatly appreciate that some of you just leave a comment for the algorithm. I'm not encouraging you to do that, it's almost disingenuous, but it is hilarious, and of course it does help, so thank you. Now, it is loading the last scene. This is definitely interesting. We can get rid of that. Probably even maximize it. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm very curious, and I will test out the power consumption of this as well. So give it a minute. This is all still real time. I'm not speeding it up, and then I'll blow it out the water because I'm bored. All right, I am definitely getting bored with that, and I know their newer versions have some updates. So what I'm going to do now is jump through into here and go do release. Whoop. What? Okay, so the first thing that you need to do then, if that's not available, is go to the software settings. Now, I've only done this on the full OS, and that's not what's on here, which is quite interesting. So we do actually need their documentation to update it. For now, let's have a quick look at what this does. Yes, I do want to close the windows because there is no do release upgrade. Yeah, that's, I don't think it's going to be very helpful. I think this is just an embedded website with information that I need to learn a lot more about before I come back to it. Definitely interesting though. I'm glad they have that there. How am I going to update? Can we, I didn't actually consider. We go sudo apt update and apt upgrade. We're not going to be able to get up to 3.0 though, because I don't believe that there is a release of Bianbu Star instead of Bianbu Desktop that is up to 3.0 yet, but we'll have a look. Whilst that's going, I will pause it. I'll come back in a tick so you're not sitting in silence. So whilst we're waiting on that, here's something interesting for you. I don't know if you can quickly catch it there, but there's a 1.7 gig Ollama model that I've downloaded. It's a little bit annoying that the apt update is updating an entire large language model. Here we go, 1.7 gig there. Look, folks at SpacemiT, I really don't think you need your large language models in your apt repository. I think that's actually going to be doing some damage to some people. That's content, that's data, that's not application or system files. So I would really recommend removing that so I don't have to sit here waiting 20 minutes for everything that's going on. In the meantime, I nearly got the documentation to load once, but it didn't. It was so very close. I got it to load 5 lines from the appendix, but we're going to have to really knock them down a peg on the SBC tier list for this just not working and not being available. The easiest solution would be obviously putting Cloudflare in front of it, just to get a free Cloudflare account, turn on the WAF, it's going to cache it automatically, and it will be fast and effective for everyone. Now, the SBC tier list that I was talking about is over here. So you see it is very basic, but I have split it into different SBC types, well, SBCs, ESBCs, where they don't have a dedicated display output, embedded system boards, where it's much more focused on, like Raspberry Pi Picos, on just being a system board that can't run a full Linux. It might run something very basic like a BusyBox, but that's different to embedded system boards, which are different from full SBCs. And of course, you've got dev boards, which are kits that kind of show off everything that a processor can do. And we've had a few of those, but I'm going to be ranking this on the tier list, and it's going to lose some points for that documentation. So I hope one day that they really fix this. But in the meantime, we've nearly finished updating. Then we're going to reboot. We're going to check the power consumption, and we're going to see if we can watch one of our own videos before we put it on that tier list. So I'll be back in a tick. All right, pardon my squeaky chair. Here we have our good old Finersi, I think it said, FNB58, my favorite power meter. And we're going to plug it back in because it finished the updates. I shut it down. Oh, it's nice and warm. It's cold here, so that's quite lovely. Plug it back in, and we'll be able to see what power it is drawing. Now, if we go back to HDMI, apparently you can hit F2, so I'm going to keep spamming that to get into the UEFI configuration menu. And I'm curious, hey, oh, this is very different and strange. Huh. Okay. Interesting. This is actually pretty cool. So this is a really, really good step in the right direction for kind of bridging SBCs and the way they work with device trees and what is essentially ACPI, which they don't usually implement. And U-Boot and UEFI has the option to bridge that gap, which is just fantastic in my opinion. So there is a bit of a lag there. It obviously has to load it from that SPI flash, and that's not the fastest thing out there, but that looks like a very good executable and a great starting point for so much more to make SBCs more accessible to the common person. Because I think one of the big issues is a lot of people that might be familiar with Linux or familiar with computers try to get going with one of these, and they have to learn about UART and serial output. They have to learn about U-Boot and boot configuration and Arcade Dev Tool or Upgrade Tool or Titan Flasher in the case of these that they use to flash it. And it's much less plug and play because it doesn't have plug and play. There's no ACPI. It's device trees and U-Boot configurations and flash memory. So this is a huge step in a very good direction there, I think. Judging by this, it's nearly fully booted up. Let's have a quick flick there. Ooh, that looks nice. They've changed it again. And it's drawing 0.5 amp, which is pretty good. So we'll go back to here. Let's log in. I'm not going to put Bianbu Desktop 3.0 on this and test that out because nothing is working on their website. Oh, holy hell. Did you actually, I don't know if desktop, you saw that? We got this far. All right, we'll see if that wants to load. We'll come back to it. Back here though, it's loading the desktop. I've just logged in. And in fact, I've got to go back here because this is actually loading now. It's just loaded the Muse line. It hasn't loaded. There we go. We're getting some specifications. Firmware flashing. Bianbu, they've typoed that pretty badly. Desktop firmware download and upgrade. So flashing process, hold the download button. Images taking 100 years. Here we can see there is 3.0, which is excellent. You've got two different versions. So if you're ever looking at these, the .image version is for the SD card. The non.image version is for the eMMC on board. And if we have a look back here, it's still only drawing 0.5 amp. So let's go to our web browser and full screen some video. We'll see then, youtube.com. This is responding quite nicely. It feels very good. I'm just checking the temperature on the bottom. Very, very manageable temperature there. It's not hot at all. 60 degrees is going to be hurting your hand. or getting close to hurting your hands. 70 definitely is, and you really don't want it going over 70. If it burns you, it needs cooling. Like most things, except a fire. If it burns you, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. This is a little bit slow. So what I think we can do then is we can start, whilst that's loading, we can go through some of the tier listings. So we're going to rate it out of its features and specs, price and availability, documentation and support, software images, performance and reliability, and accessories/compatibility. So from the top, price and availability. Let's go have a look. All right, so I found two. You've got a Taobao, well, it's only the MUSE Pi, and I wouldn't touch this website with a 10-foot rusty hellbarred, so I'm going to close that. But there are some listings on AliExpress, and I'm completely okay with AliExpress. Interesting, they've got it pre-configured, and they've got the different bundles available here, but 8 gig with 64 gig like we've got here for 190 Australian, that's probably going to be about 120 US. Pretty good in my opinion. 13 bucks shipping I could give or take, but so be it. So price and availability is 3 stars. You've got only Chinese vendors. You've got no mass distribution. You've got no resellers link on the website that I could find. So 3 stars for that one. In fact, I think the 190 price point is quite good. It's a sub $200 unit that is actually very capable for a lot of purposes, just with the amount of expansion interfaces that you've got. Completely forgot that you've got an LVDS or maybe DSI interface there too. I didn't even mention that for some reason. So gonna give it a 3 for that. Next on features and specs. So the form factor is excellent. It's got a good CPU, good RAM. It's got onboard eMMC, supports SD card. It's got Wi-Fi, it's got Ethernet. It's got a Pi 2 header, it looks like, with 40 GPIO pins. The GPU, I don't know, questionable. M2 mini PCIe, real-time clock port on the back. It's got a built-in NPU and some documentation about the AI. 4K I'm not too sure about, but it's got mPCIe and DSI. It doesn't appear to have any PoE support though. All of that has to give it a 5. Would love PoE. I'd love to be able to see the documentation so I knew if it supported 4K. The rest of it's great. In fact, let's, if we go back over to the HDMI, we might even be able to see if it supports 4K just from here. Not seeing any 4K options. I'm still giving it 5 out of 5. I'm going to write that down over here so I don't forget. We've got 5 out of 5 for features and specs. Documentation and support, that's a 1. It's there, but you got to hang around for a while. So it's hard to get to. It's hard to navigate. It keeps reverting to Chinese, and most of the tools are for Windows. So you're getting a 1 for that. Sorry, folks. I love you. You make some great products, but that one's not going well for you. Software and images. So you do have the NAS version, the robot version, the light version, the full version, and the BSP. That is excellent. One's based on Buildroot, one's based on Ubuntu. You have frequent updates. You've got SD card and eMMC images, and you do also link to the Milk 5 and the Banana Pi variants too. So I'm going to give you a 4. No, I'm going to give you a 5 out of 5 for that. I think you're covering all bases there. You're covering variations, the C libraries, the update frequency. Your kernel version is really good. You've got third-party resources. So again, you're going to get a 5 for your software images and firmware. Performance and reliability. We're going to be considering general use. I'd say it's quite good, especially for RISC-V running a desktop environment. GPU, crashes, ease of use, Wi-Fi strength, and 3D. So we'll try 3D really basically. Let's go over to our HDMI input and just see if we've got any GL mark installed here. We don't. Oh, that's a shame. Have we got a basic WebGL 3D test that we can do? WebGL fish tank. Oh, yeah, that'll do. Got a feeling this might actually be. Oh no, I think that's hardware. Yeah, that almost has to be hardware. All right, alrighty, go SpacemiT. So GPU 3D. So the general use, excellent. RISC-V is a bit slower because it's not all there yet, and that's why I'm so excited about Debian really working well, because the hardware is quite excellent, but the software support is like 3 to 5 years behind a lot of the time. So Debian 13 is going to help accelerate that. So is Western Digital, so is NVIDIA and their recent announcement, so is companies like SpacemiT making these awesome products, so is Milk5, so is Banana Pi, so is Ubuntu's adoption, so is all of your support for this open ISA. Thoroughly love it. 2D seemed fine. I think there's some I/O lag there perhaps. It hasn't crashed once. It has been easy to use, a little bit of Chinese at the first setup, but that might be fixed in a newer image. Wi-Fi strength was excellent once we added those antennas and the GPU work. So I'm going to give you a 5 out of 5 actually for performance and reliability, which is kind of insane. And lastly is accessories and compatibility. So power is USB Type-C, which is excellent. No PoE. You've got 2 different camera options, display connector, full-size HDMI. You've got a standard 3.5mm audio port, USB 3.0, gigabit networking, 40 pins, SPI flash, SD card, onboard eMMC. What else am I missing? It even comes with a case. The only thing I'd maybe do is recommend that this has a bit of a cutout, because if I mean, this is a male one, but if we need to stick a pin on there, that ain't gonna fit, Joe. So accessories and compatibility also has to be a 5 out of 5. This is nearly a home run. This is nearly an S tier. It's actually quite incredible. The documentation is the only thing that severely let it down. And there was some very early price availability issues that let it down, but those can be fixed. So we just saw it jump to over 1 amp there. So I'm quite impressed. And if we're to do the math on that, let's go back and see what calculator this has built in. So doing 3D, it's using about an amp, which is fantastic. That's 5 watts. That's free energy at that point. Don't even get the conspiracy theorists started. Do we have a calculator here? We don't have a calculator. There's another way I can do this. So if we just go echo, we want to do 3. In fact, we're going to want to do another one of those. 3 plus 5 plus 1 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 divided by 6 is 4. So we have a 4 out of 5, which gives this a very, very solid A tier. Let's just see how it goes. We had some very different lighting there. We're just watching a YouTube video. That's what a lot of people want to do with a desktop application. That's not what I'm saying this is for. It is not a desktop replacement computer. It's a development environment for nearly every bit of connectivity you can have on a RISC-V SBC. Now you are seeing here there are some limitations, and that's expected. So you've got to be patient with it, and I'm being patient with it, but we only have so much patience. I do not want anything to do with that. Yeah, that's definitely 2D accelerated, and that's definitely looking good. If it wants to catch up with my full screen, yeah, no issues there. I'm going to assume the audio is working. I don't even think I need to test it. This is better than a lot of the others. And I don't know if that's because they've used the star variant this time, or if it's just because of how good this product is or how far RISC-V has come. But this is really quite excellent. I'm happy in many, many ways. And I'd love to know what you think. So the last things I'm going to quickly touch on now, before we wrap up, is that I do have a Patreon. So if you're enjoying this content and if you want to support this channel, it would be awesome if you come and join us. You get behind the scenes access. So you get to see videos for about a week before I release them with no adverts. You get to jump in the community where we have a chat. I'm going to give you support if you need some help, and I'm capable, but it starts really cheap at about $3 US. So if you want to support me, I'd greatly, greatly appreciate that. There is, of course, a free tier where you just get some stuff that I put up from time to time and to have a bit of a yarn, but don't expect me to do anything for free because life is expensive these days. Now, there is also Brilliant. Thank you kindly to Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Don't forget that to get a free 30-day trial and 20% off a premium subscription, go to brilliant.org/PlatimaTinkers and start your learning journey. Lastly, I'd like to thank all of you for your support, your comments, your encouragement, your emails sometimes. everything like that's fantastic. I would not have it any other way. That includes the patrons that I just mentioned. You guys are fantastic. And then, of course, I do have one to give away to remind you, to another creator out there, Gearling, if you're around, if you want one of these sent to you, let me know. I'd love to see what you do with it. There is quite a few people out there that I think could do some great things with it. So thank you again for coming. I hope this video was informative.